My name is Kendra Hale. I always thought my family's worst trait was that they couldn't take anything seriously. They treated everything like a performance, like life was one long group chat where the loudest person wins and the cruelest joke gets replayed for years. When I was younger, I learned to laugh along. When I got older, I learned to stay quiet. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just how they were, that I could build a life around it and keep the mess contained to holidays and birthdays. Then came my engagement dinner, and I learned the truth. We picked a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place that felt warm even in the corners, where the windows fogged up when the kitchen was busy, and the air smelled like garlic and wine. I'd been going there since my early 20s, back when I was broke and could only afford pasta and tap water. The owner, Marco, still recognized me. He greeted me like family, like I belonged somewhere uncomplicated. He gave us the big table near the window, and for a few minutes I let myself pretend the night would stay simple. Caleb was thrilled. He'd spent the past week talking about how our families would finally meet properly, how this dinner would be the beginning of a new chapter. He said it with that hopeful certainty men have when they believe love automatically smooths out sharp edges. I didn't have the heart to tell him that with my family, new chapters usually turn into disasters. Not because they mean to destroy things, because they don't notice when they're doing it. And if someone points it out, they act like you're the problem for caring. The night started fine. My dad, Dennis, was telling a story about a fishing trip that somehow involved 3 different near-death experiences and a cooler that definitely wasn't his fault. My uncle was already on his second glass of wine, handing Caleb sloppy compliments about being a good-looking guy and brave for marrying into this circus. My mom, Marilyn, was in a good mood, laughing too loudly, touching my arm like she was proving to Caleb's parents that she was warm and normal. Caleb's family were polite, kind people, a little overwhelmed by the volume at our table, but they tried. They smiled at the right times. They asked questions. They made space. And I kept watching my sister. Emily sat across from me with that familiar, restless energy. She was smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind she wore when she thought she was about to say something iconic, something that would make everyone laugh and look at her like she was the star of the moment. Emily has always loved moments. She loves attention the way some people love oxygen. And if she can't get attention through charm, she gets it through shock. Dessert came, and the waiter set a plate of tiramisu in front of me. I remember the cocoa dusting, the neat edges, the smell sweet and rich. I remember thinking, for 1 second, that this was it. This was the night I would always remember. The night my worlds met and didn't collide. Then Emily leaned across the table. She had that smug, fake cute smile, the one she uses when she wants to pretend she's harmless. She lifted her glass slightly and said, clear as day, here's to the girl who will probably get left at the altar. It landed like a gunshot. Caleb froze. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth, like his body didn't know what to do with what he'd just heard. His mom blinked, confused. His dad's smile tightened. For a heartbeat, the whole table went silent, in that stunned way people go silent when something has crossed a line and they're waiting to see if someone will correct it. My mom burst out laughing. Oh, don't say that, she said, still laughing, like it was an innocent joke, like Emily had just teased him about his tie. No one told Emily to stop. My cousin smirked into his wine glass. My uncle let out a low chuckle, like he didn't want to get involved but couldn't resist the entertainment. My dad shook his head, amused, like Emily was just being Emily and Caleb should learn to roll with it. I didn't react, not outwardly. I kept eating, my face calm, my hand steady on the fork. But under the table, Caleb's hand found mine, and his grip tightened. He leaned in close, his voice low but controlled, and said, that's not funny, not even close. Emily rolled her eyes like he was overreacting. Relax, it's a joke. Caleb's cheeks flushed. Do you have any idea how rude that is? You're sitting here at your sister's engagement dinner, making a bet on whether she'll actually get married. The table shifted. My mom's laughter turned into a strained smile. Oh, come on, she said, waving her hand. You need to learn not to take things so seriously. Caleb didn't back down. And you need to learn how to show basic respect. That was the moment I realized something important. Caleb wasn't just marrying me. He was willing to stand between me and my family's cruelty, even if it cost him their approval. He was willing to make it uncomfortable. He was willing to say the truth out loud. and something in me snapped. Because for years, I had been the one quietly holding everything together. They treated me like background music, like a reliable utility, like the person who would always fix it, pay it, handle it, smooth it over. And I did, over and over. I covered Emily's rent when she couldn't find a job. I paid for my mom's water heater when hers broke. I handled my cousin's fines so he wouldn't lose his license. I paid tuition. I paid down payments. I paid for emergencies that weren't mine because I couldn't stand watching things fall apart. Somewhere along the way, my generosity stopped looking like generosity to them. It started looking like my job. So that night, when Emily toasted to my fiancé being left at the altar and my mother laughed along, I didn't explode. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't give them what they expected, which was me swallowing it quietly and moving on. I waited until Caleb and I were home. He asked if I was okay. His voice was careful, protective. I told him I was done. That was all. Just one sentence. I'm done letting them treat me like this. Caleb stared at me for a moment, then nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. I opened my laptop. Emily's semester abroad in Spain was supposed to start the following week. I had paid the tuition 3 days earlier. I remembered clicking submit, thinking I was helping her build a life, thinking it was what a good sister does. I found the program email, called the finance office, sat on hold for 40 minutes, listening to tinny music with my heart beating slow and steady in my chest. When the representative picked up, I spoke calmly. I asked to reverse the payment. I gave the details. I confirmed the cancellation. The confirmation email came through just after midnight. Enrollment canceled. Balance unpaid. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't post about it. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply removed the safety net they had been bouncing on for years. Caleb came up behind me, kissed my shoulder, and said quietly, "This is going to be interesting." I didn't smile. I just closed the laptop and went to bed, because I already knew what morning would bring. The next morning, the storm hit at exactly the kind of time that makes chaos feel official. Not noon, not late afternoon, but early enough that it ruins your whole day before you've even had a chance to pretend you're fine. It was 8:40 a.m. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the kind of slow routine that usually steadies me. Caleb was leaning against the counter, scrolling his phone, still quiet from the night before, still watching me like he was waiting to see if I would regret what I'd done. I didn't. Not even a little. My hands were calm. My thoughts were clear. I had crossed a line my family didn't believe I was capable of crossing, and I could feel it in my bones like a new spine had grown overnight. Caleb's phone lit up first. He glanced down, frowned, then looked at me without saying a word. The screen kept flashing, messages stacking, notifications rolling in like a flood. "It's Emily," he said finally, and there was something almost impressed in his voice. "She's blowing up your phone, and mine. And apparently she found my number somehow." I took a sip of coffee without asking why. I already knew why. I already knew exactly what she was about to say, because my sister has only ever had two modes when she doesn't get what she wants: rage and panic. Rage first. Panic when rage doesn't work. Caleb slid his phone across the counter. The message on the screen was in all caps, like volume could change reality. "My flight is canceled. They said my visa is revoked. What did you do?" I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. I just went back to pouring coffee into my mug as if my kitchen wasn't about to become the center of my family's emergency broadcast system. For a second, Caleb watched me like he was watching a scene in a movie where the main character finally snaps, finally stops playing nice. Then his mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen on him since the dinner. Less than a minute later, my own phone buzzed. Same text, same caps, same accusation, followed by, "Call me now." Then came a string of question marks. Dozens of them, like punctuation, could bully me into obedience. Caleb leaned over my shoulder and read it again. "Visa revoked," he murmured. "That's impressively fast." I shrugged, not because it didn't matter, but because I wasn't going to perform guilt for a consequence my sister created. "The tuition reversal probably didn't look like a hiccup," I said. "No payment, no enrollment, no student visa." The silence between us felt oddly peaceful. Then my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. Then Emily called. then my cousin, then my uncle. It was like they had a group alarm system and I had triggered it. The phone kept buzzing so hard it vibrated the counter, and for a moment I just stared at it, amazed at how quickly their concern could mobilize when it involved money I used to provide. I flipped my phone face down and started making toast. Caleb watched me with a kind of quiet satisfaction. "You're really not going to answer," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "No," I said simply. "They can wait." By 9 a.m., the tone shifted from panic to authority. Mom sent a text. "Emily's future is at risk. You need to fix this right now. Family helps family." Caleb read it over my shoulder and let out a soft, humorless laugh. Where was family helps family last night when they were laughing about me being left at the altar? His words landed like truth does, clean and sharp. I felt it in my chest. That's what I'd been trying not to say out loud for years. The rules were always written in invisible ink, and somehow the ink only appeared when they wanted something. At 9:15 a.m., the family group chat I'd been dragged into months ago lit up like a fireworks show. My cousin wrote, "If this is about last night, you're being dramatic." My aunt followed with, "We don't air dirty laundry in front of outsiders." Caleb didn't even look at me before taking my phone and typing back. "Then maybe don't create dirty laundry in the first place." He hit send. I didn't stop him. At 9:30 a.m., Emily must have realized her rage wasn't getting traction, so she called Caleb directly. He answered and put it on speaker, like he wanted the air cleared in the open. Her voice came through hot and fast. "Did you convince her to do this?" she snapped, like she couldn't process that my choices could exist without a man guiding them. "Is this you controlling her because you're insecure?" Caleb's expression didn't change. "No," he said evenly. "She decided you don't get to insult us at our engagement dinner and still expect her to fund your life." Emily's breath hitched. "You're ruining my life." "You manage that yourself," Caleb said, still calm, and then he ended the call without waiting for her response. I stood there for a second with my hands on the counter, feeling something strange settle over me. Not guilt, relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. By 11:45 a.m., Mom sent one final text. "If you don't fix this, don't bother coming to Sunday dinner." Caleb read it, looked at me, and said, "Perfect." I raised an eyebrow. "That means we get our Sundays back," he added, like it was a gift she didn't realize she was giving us. The rest of the day, the calls didn't stop, but something was different. The anger had an edge of uncertainty now. The guilt trips were frantic. The threats were thin. They were realizing, slowly, painfully, that they couldn't force me into my old role with volume and pressure anymore. And once people realize they can't control you, they start doing something even more dangerous. They start negotiating. Saturday morning felt like waking up in the aftermath of a storm where the damage hadn't fully revealed itself yet. My phone was quiet for the first 10 minutes, and in that silence, I could almost hear my family regrouping, recalculating, trying to figure out which lever to pull next. Rage hadn't worked. Threats hadn't worked. Silence hadn't scared me into compliance. That left them with only one option they'd rarely had to use on me before: bargaining. At 8:15 a.m., my cousin Matt kicked it off in the group chat. "Maybe if we all chip in, she can still make it." I actually laughed. Not out loud, but the kind of laugh that happens inside your chest when irony is too sharp to ignore. This was the same man who borrowed $2,000 from me last year and hadn't paid back a single cent. The same man who always seemed to have a financial emergency when rent was due, but somehow always had money for weekend trips. Then my aunt chimed in. "She'll miss out on so many memories. You wouldn't take that from your own sister, would you?" The phrasing was impressive in its audacity, as if I had personally snuck into Emily's room in the dead of night and stolen her passport, as if consequences were acts of violence instead of outcomes. By 8:30, Mom joined the negotiation phase. She started sending me links to budget airlines with captions like, "Look, these are under $600. We can make this work if you just send the money." The word "we" sat there on my screen like a lie that hadn't even bothered to put on a disguise. Caleb was sitting next to me on the couch, coffee in hand, scrolling through the messages like he was reading a particularly messy tabloid. "They still think this is a bluff," he said quietly. "They think if they throw enough guilt at you, you'll fold like you always have." "They don't get it yet," I said. Around 10 o'clock a.m., Emily changed tactics. Gone were the all caps and accusations. In their place appeared a 5-paragraph essay about how this semester abroad was her once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, how it would define her career, how without it she'd fall behind everyone else her age. It was carefully written, almost polished, like she'd run it past someone before hitting send. She talked about growth, about independence, about dreams. Caleb read it twice, then handed the phone back to me with an unimpressed look. Her career, he said flatly. She's changed majors more times than I've changed my passwords. At 11:02, something landed that hit differently. A text from my cousin Renee. She's always been the quiet one in our family, the observer, the person who stayed out of drama unless it became impossible to ignore. Her message was blunt. Everyone's freaking out because you've always been the one holding everything together. You don't pay, the whole system collapses. Seeing it written, that plainly made my stomach drop. I'd always known it on some level, but reading it without the usual family spin stripped away any remaining denial. This wasn't just about Emily's trip. It was about the fact that I had finally proven I was willing to let them fail. That evening, Caleb and I went out for dinner. Not to celebrate, just to breathe somewhere that wasn't saturated with my family's panic. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed again. Mom. This time her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded tired, worn down. Kendra, she said softly, can we just talk? Sure, I replied calmly, but nothing's changing. She launched into how Emily had been crying all day, calling relatives, begging for help. She said the situation was embarrassing for the family. That word again, embarrassing. Caleb leaned toward the phone. What was embarrassing was laughing when your daughter insulted your future son-in-law at his engagement dinner. Mom pretended not to hear him and kept talking. She's your sister. You can't just let her miss this opportunity. I can, I said, and I am. I ended the call before she could pivot into the sympathy angle. When we got home, I had 3 new messages from different relatives, all variations of the same sentiment. We didn't think you'd actually go through with it. That was the moment I realized I'd crossed a line they never thought I'd have the nerve to cross. I wasn't the reliable safety net anymore. I was the loose thread they were afraid to pull. By Sunday morning, the tone had shifted again. Full-on negotiation mode. At 8:05 a.m., Matt sent me a voice message. He spoke slowly, carefully, like he was afraid of setting off an alarm. Look, I know I owe you money from before, but if you can cover Emily's tuition, I'll pay you back, plus interest. It might have sounded sincere if I didn't know he was currently living in his friend's basement with about $40 in his checking account. At 8:20, my aunt offered to cover Emily's housing in Spain, so I'd only have to handle tuition. She even added a little heart emoji, like a cartoon symbol could erase years of passive-aggressive jabs and casual disrespect. By 9:02, Mom called again. Caleb answered without asking me, put it on speaker. Kendra needs to think about the bigger picture, Mom said sharply. If Emily can't finish her degree, it reflects badly on all of us as a family. Caleb didn't flinch. You're worried about how it looks. You should have worried about that when you toasted to me getting dumped at my own engagement dinner. There was a long pause. Then Mom tried something I hadn't expected. What if I pay you back? She said quickly. It might take time, but I'll get the money to you eventually. I laughed, not kindly. You've been getting the money to me eventually since I was 21, I said. It hasn't happened yet. She didn't argue. She just hung up. At 10:00, the situation took a strange turn. Renee texted again. You should check Facebook. Caleb pulled it up while I buttered toast. He scrolled for a few seconds, then let out a low whistle. Wow, he said. She went for the jugular. Emily had made a public post, long, detailed, tagging half the family and several old classmates. She painted me as jealous, controlling, someone who couldn't stand to see her succeed. She claimed I sabotaged her future because I was afraid of being upstaged by my younger sister. But in her rush to prove how oppressed she'd been, she made a fatal mistake. She listed everything, every major expense I'd ever covered for her. Rent, car down payment, tuition, trips, emergency bills, all of it. In her own words, on a public platform. Caleb grinned. She basically wrote your resume as the only reason she's ever had opportunities. By 1:00 p.m., the comments rolled in, not from strangers, from mutual friends, from extended family, and they weren't taking her side. If my sister did half that for me, I'd be grateful for life. You sound entitled, Emily. Maybe don't bite the hand that paid all your tolls. By 4:00, she edited the post. It didn't matter. Screenshots were already everywhere. By 6:00, Renee texted again. She's calling people trying to get them to take the post down. She's panicking. Caleb leaned back on the couch, calm. She's realizing she doesn't control the story anymore. And that was the truth. For the first time, the narrative wasn't something my family could smooth over with jokes and denial. The cracks were visible now, public, permanent. And once lies are exposed to daylight, they don't survive long. By Sunday night, the family chat felt like a disaster zone after a hurricane. Messages were stacked on messages, half of them attempts at damage control, the other half people trying to quietly distance themselves from Emily now that the comment section had turned against her. The jokes stopped. The guilt trips softened. What replaced them was something far more telling. Fear. They weren't worried about Emily anymore. Not really. They were worried about me. About what it meant that I had finally let them feel consequences without rushing in to cushion the impact. For the first time, they were imagining a version of their lives where I wasn't quietly fixing things in the background. At 7:32 a.m. on Monday, Emily texted me directly for the first time since Friday. No caps, no insults. "Can we talk, please?" 9 minutes later, another message came through. "I shouldn't have said what I said at dinner. It was just a joke. Let's not make this bigger than it is." Caleb read it over my shoulder and shook his head. "That's not an apology," he said. "That's a reset attempt." "She's trying to rewind to before the Facebook post," I replied, "before everyone saw the receipts." At 8 o'clock a.m., my Uncle Rick called me. A man who hadn't called me in 3 years, unless he needed money. His voice was low, almost embarrassed. "I just want you to know," he said. "I didn't think what Emily said was funny. I only laughed because your mom did." That sentence told me everything I needed to know about how this family worked. Laughter as permission, silence as agreement, cowardice disguised as harmony. By 8:20, my aunt sent a message that sounded similar. For the record, I didn't mean to offend Caleb. I thought it was harmless teasing. No one was apologizing to me. They were trying to make sure they weren't next. At 9:15, Renee called. "You should know," she said quietly. "They're turning on Emily fast. I've never seen them throw someone under the bus like this. I think they're scared you'll cut them off the way you cut her off." She was right, and fear makes people do desperate things. At 11:00 a.m., Emily tried again. This time it was a wall of text, nearly 500 words long. She talked about growth, about lessons learned, about how she'd never ask for anything again if I just helped her this one last time. The phrasing was eerily familiar. Caleb didn't even look surprised. "She's made that exact promise before," he said, word for word. "Remember the Cancun trip?" At 2 p.m., an email landed in my inbox from the Overseas Programs Finance Department. Subject: regarding Emily Carter's enrollment. They confirmed the payment reversal. Then came the line that changed everything. Emily had contacted them that morning, trying to find a new sponsor. They had refused, citing previous payment disputes. Translation: even if someone else wanted to pay now, they wouldn't take the risk. Caleb leaned in to read it over my shoulder. "She's not just out of money," he said quietly. "She's locked out." By 3:30, Mom called again. No anger, no threats, just a careful, controlled tone. "She's willing to apologize to everyone if you'll help her," she said. An hour later, Renee texted, "Emily says she's ready to apologize to you publicly if that's what it takes." That stopped me. Public apologies didn't happen in my family. Ever. If she was even willing to offer it, she must have been drowning. And I knew, in that moment, that this wasn't just about winning an argument anymore. This was my one chance to change the rules permanently. I texted Emily back. Public apology, Friday dinner, in front of everyone, no excuses. Her reply came in less than 10 seconds. "Fine." No emoji, no sarcasm, just one word. Friday night felt like walking into a courtroom disguised as a family dinner. Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even the ones who only showed up when there was food or drama. The energy in the room was wrong, heavy, restrained. No one joked. No one raised their voice. Silverware clinked against plates too loudly in the silence. Emily kept glancing at me like she was timing her move. Halfway through dessert, she stood up. "I want to apologize to my sister," she said, her voice steady, but her fingers white-knuckled around the edge of her plate. "What I said at her engagement dinner was wrong. It wasn't a joke. I've taken too much from her over the years and given nothing back. That changes now." The room froze. I let the silence stretch, long enough to make people uncomfortable, long enough to make it real. "Apology accepted," I said calmly, "but there's something everyone here needs to understand." I looked around the table. Faces avoided my eyes. "I will never again give a single dollar to anyone in this family without respect. If you can't give that, Don't ask. My mom opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. I reached into my pocket, placed my phone face up on the table. And just so we're clear, I added, I save screenshots of everything, the posts, the messages, the jokes. If anyone forgets tonight's lesson, I'll be happy to remind them. Caleb didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His presence said enough. After dinner, my mom walked us to the door. She hesitated. You really meant all that, didn't you? I did, I said, and I always will. For 3 months after that dinner, everything went quiet. No late-night calls asking for help. No casual insults disguised as humor. No emergencies that somehow required my credit card. Emily got a part-time job at a bookstore, working weekends. She posted photos of latte art instead of passive-aggressive quotes. She didn't thank me for what I'd done before, but she didn't mock me again either. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't an emergency hotline. I started to think maybe it was over. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, Renee called. You sitting down? She asked. I'm at work, I said. What now? It's Emily, she replied. She's dating someone, and it's not just anyone. I sighed. Of course she is. There's more, Renee said. He's from her overseas program. He's back in the States, and she's telling people she almost didn't get to meet him because you pulled the plug on her trip. She's spinning it like you regret what you did. I laughed, genuinely this time. Of course she is. But the real twist came later that day. Emily texted Caleb. Can we have dinner sometime? I want to talk about something important. Caleb showed me the message. She's never invited us anywhere before. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. She was already there when we arrived, sitting at a table with 2 cappuccinos and a man I didn't recognize. Early 30s, polite smile. The kind of guy who looked like he owned exactly one nice jacket and wore it everywhere. This is Daniel, Emily said brightly. We're engaged. I nearly choked on my coffee. 3 months. That's all it took for her to build a new fairy tale. She leaned forward, eyes shining. Daniel and I were thinking, you and Caleb should come to the wedding. It's in Italy. Caleb blinked. Italy? Emily ignored him. We wanted to give you the first opportunity to be part of it, and of course, help us make it happen. There it was. The ask dressed up in romance and destiny, but still the same play. Different costume, same script. I smiled, calm, pleasant. I'll think about it, I said. And I meant it, just not in the way she hoped. Because if Emily thought she could rewrite the ending of this story, she'd forgotten one important detail. I wasn't the background character anymore. I was the one holding the pen. I didn't answer Emily right away after that dinner. I let the silence stretch the same way I had at the family table months earlier. Silence, I'd learned, was the only language my family respected once money stopped talking for me. A week passed, then another. Finally, I texted her back. Caleb and I won't be contributing financially. If you still want us there, we'll attend as guests. If not, we understand. Her reply took hours. When it came, it was short. We'll talk. We never did. The invitation never arrived. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. Because the truth had finally settled into place. My value to my family had never been about love or respect. It had been about access. Access to my resources, my patience, my willingness to clean up messes that weren't mine. When that access disappeared, so did the games. Caleb summed it up one night as we sat on the couch, feet tangled together, the apartment quiet and safe. You didn't just win, he said. You changed the rules. I smiled. Good, I said. They needed new rules.